The late afternoon sun of 2005, a golden, languid light particular to the foothills of the Sierras Chicas, spilled through the open windows of the Guzman home in Villa Carlos Paz, Argentina. Dust motes danced in the warm air, illuminating the worn patterns of the living room rug, the comfortable plumpness of the sofa, and the scattering of toys that spoke of a young boy's presence. It was into this tableau of joyful domesticity, of sun-drenched peace, that a new heartbeat was about to arrive, a small, vibrant pulse that would forever alter the rhythm of their lives. Damian Guzman, a boy whose boundless energy usually kept him in perpetual motion, was for once utterly still, perched on the edge of the sofa, his knees practically vibrating with anticipation. His eyes, wide with a mixture of hope and disbelief, were fixed on his father, Miguel. Miguel, a man of quiet strength and gentle smiles, held a cardboard box, its top slightly ajar. A soft, inquisitive whimper, barely audible, escaped from within. "Ready, mijo?" Miguel's voice, a low rumble of affection, was tinged with a conspiratorial delight. He knelt, setting the box carefully on the polished floorboards. The scent of fresh pine, carried in from the garden, mingled with the faint, comforting aroma of Veronica's baking from the kitchen, a symphony of homely fragrances that deepened the sense of familial warmth. Damian could only nod, his breath caught in his throat. He watched, mesmerized, as Miguel slowly, carefully, opened the flaps of the box. And then, there it was. A tiny, fluffy bundle of German Shepherd puppy, all oversized paws, floppy ears, and eyes like polished obsidian marbles, blinked up at them. Its fur, a rich tapestry of sable and black, seemed impossibly soft, inviting touch. The puppy, initially bewildered by the sudden light, gave another tentative whimper, then, emboldened by the soft murmurs of the humans, pushed its tiny nose out, sniffing the unfamiliar air with a comical intensity. Damian let out a gasp, a pure, unadulterated sound of ecstatic happiness. He slid off the sofa, landing with a soft thud, and instinctively reached out a tentative hand. "Careful, cachorrito," Miguel advised, his hand resting gently on Damian's shoulder. "He's just a baby." But the puppy, with the fearless abandon of youth, didn't hesitate. It tumbled out of the box, a clumsy, adorable avalanche of fur, and immediately began to explore Damian's outstretched fingers with its wet, cold nose. A tiny, rasping lick, then another, sent shivers of pure joy through the boy. He giggled, a sound like wind chimes, and knelt down, bringing his face level with the puppy's. He's Capitan," Damian declared, the name already formed in his mind, a testament to the puppy's nascent strength and spirit. He scooped the small creature into his arms, holding him close, feeling the rapid thump of the tiny heart against his own chest. The puppy wriggled, then settled, its warm weight a comforting presence. Veronica, drawn by the sudden burst of Damian's laughter, emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. A smile, broad and radiant, spread across her face as she saw the scene, her son, utterly captivated, cradling the new family member, and Miguel, standing a little behind them, his expression one of quiet satisfaction. He had brought this joy into their home, a new beginning, a promise of companionship. The air thrummed with unspoken affection, with the simple, profound happiness of a family expanding, welcoming a new, innocent soul into its fold. Capitan, oblivious to the momentousness of his arrival, simply yawned, a wide, pink cavern, and then, nestled securely in Damian's arms, promptly fell asleep. The gentle hum of the refrigerator, the distant chirping of cicadas, and the soft breathing of the new puppy blended into the perfect soundtrack of a beautiful, ordinary day, now made extraordinary. As the calendar pages turned from 2005 into the early months of 2006, Capitan, no longer a clumsy bundle of fur but a sleek, rapidly growing German Shepherd, quickly integrated into the fabric of the Guzman household. His puppy-like abandon matured into a graceful energy, his initial curiosity into a keen intelligence. He learned the rhythm of the house, the cadences of human voices, the unspoken signals of affection. He was Damian's constant playmate, chasing balls across the sun-dappled lawn, wrestling playfully, and enduring the enthusiastic, if sometimes clumsy, hugs of a boy who adored him. Yet, amidst this joyful integration, a unique and profound bond began to blossom, a silent understanding that transcended the boisterous energy of childhood. This connection, deep and almost spiritual, was between Capitan and Miguel. It was subtle at first, a preference, a gentle leaning. While Damien would call, Capitan's eyes would often seek out Miguel. While Damien would offer a toy, Capitan might choose to settle by Miguel's feet. Their mornings often began with shared walks. Miguel, an early riser, would step out into the crisp morning air, the scent of dew-kissed grass and blooming jasmine heavy around them, and Capitan would be right there, a silent, loyal shadow. They would traverse the quiet, winding streets of Villa Carlos Paz, the dog trotting purposefully beside his master, his powerful gait synchronized with Miguel's steady stride. There was no need for a leash often, just an unspoken agreement, a mutual respect. Miguel would speak to him in soft tones, almost murmuring, about the day ahead, about the quiet beauty of the sunrise painting the sky over the distant mountains. Capitan, his head cocked slightly, would listen with an almost human attentiveness, his gaze fixed on Miguel's face, absorbing every nuance of his master's mood. In the afternoons, when Miguel returned from his work, the house would come alive with Capitan's joyful greetings. He would meet Miguel at the door, a low, rumbling growl of pure happiness vibrating in his chest, his tail a blur of motion. And then, as the evening settled, bringing with it the mellow glow of lamps and the comforting quietude of a home winding down, Capitan would inevitably seek out Miguel. He would lie on the cool tiles beside Miguel's armchair, his large head resting on his paws, his dark eyes following Miguel's every movement, or he would simply curl up on the carpet, a warm, reassuring presence at Miguel's feet as he read or watched television. Miguel, in turn, found a profound solace in Capitan's unwavering companionship. The dog was a silent confidant, a non-judgmental presence whose loyalty was absolute. He would often reach down, his fingers gently stroking the soft fur behind Capitan's ears, feeling the dog lean into his touch, a deep sigh escaping the animal. It was in these quiet moments, under the soft, filtered sunlight that streamed through the living room windows, or in the gentle lamplight of evening, that their bond deepened, growing into an unbreakable tether of affection and understanding. Damien, though still very much loved by Capitan, noticed this special connection. He saw the way Capitan's gaze lingered on his father, the subtle shift in his posture when Miguel entered a room. He understood, with the innocent wisdom of childhood, that there was a unique language spoken between his father and the dog, a silent symphony of devotion that was theirs alone. The serene companionship that had settled over the Guzman home like a warm blanket began, in the early months of 2006, to fray at the edges. A subtle shift, almost imperceptible at first, started to cast a long, disquieting shadow. Miguel Guzman, once a man of vibrant energy, whose presence filled a room with quiet strength, began to show the insidious signs of a serious illness. The vigor that had defined him, the steady stride on his morning walks, the easy laughter that punctuated family dinners, slowly, relentlessly, diminished. His movements became less fluid, more deliberate, as if each step required a conscious effort. The color in his face, once a healthy sun-kissed hue, seemed to recede, replaced by an increasing pallor. His eyes, usually bright and observant, sometimes held a distant, weary look, as though gazing at something far beyond the present moment. He would tire more easily, retreating to his armchair earlier in the evenings, his reading glasses slipping down his nose as he drifted into fitful sleep. The smell of his favorite coffee, once a daily ritual, sometimes went untouched. Capitan, with an instinct far keener than any human, was the first to sense the profound change. The dog, usually so playful and full of life, became markedly more vigilant. His bright, curious eyes, which once sparkled with mischief, now held a deep, almost human understanding, a constant watchfulness. He ceased his playful nudges for walks, no longer bringing his favorite worn tennis ball to Miguel's feet. Instead, he became Miguel's unwavering guardian, his silent sentinel. He would lie closer, always closer. If Miguel was on the sofa, Capitan was on the floor beside him, his head resting on Miguel's leg. If Miguel moved to his bed for an afternoon rest, Capitan would follow, settling on the rug by the bedside, his gaze never truly leaving his master. There was an unspoken plea in his posture, a desperate desire to protect, to somehow ward off the unseen foe that was slowly stealing Miguel's strength. The soft, rhythmic breathing of the dog became a constant, almost therapeutic, presence for Miguel, a quiet anchor in his increasingly tumultuous internal world. The family's atmosphere, once brimming with carefree joy and the lively sounds of a growing boy and his dog, shifted into one of quiet concern. Veronica, her brow often furrowed with worry, watched her husband with a heartbreaking tenderness, trying to maintain a brave front for Damien. Damien, too young to fully comprehend the gravity of the illness, felt the change like a damp chill in the air. The house was quieter, the laughter less frequent, replaced by hushed conversations and the soft creak of floorboards as someone checked on Miguel. The once vibrant sunlight filtering through the windows now seemed softer, less brilliant, casting longer, more somber shadows, reflecting the growing apprehension that tightened around their hearts. Capitan, sensing the collective anxiety, would often let out a soft whine, a mournful sound that echoed the unspoken fear permeating their once joyous home. The inevitable arrived with the cruel certainty of a gathering storm. In the mid-2006, Miguel Guzman, the gentle patriarch, the steadfast husband, the loving father, succumbed to his illness. The vibrant light that had been Miguel, the quiet strength that anchored their family, flickered and then, with a final, agonizing breath, was extinguished. The Guzman home, once a bastion of warmth and laughter, was plunged into a profound, echoing grief. The days that followed were a blur of muted colors and heavy silences. The air in the house seemed thick, suffocating, with the tangible weight of absence. Veronica moved through the rooms like a ghost, her face pale, her eyes red-rimmed and distant. Damien, bewildered and heartbroken, clung to his mother, his small body racked with sobs that tore at the very fabric of her being. The vibrant world he knew had fractured, irrevocably altered by a void so immense it felt physical. The funeral service was a solemn affair, held under a sky the color of slate, mirroring the collective sorrow. Friends and family gathered, their faces etched with sympathy, their voices hushed to respectful whispers. The scent of lilies and damp earth filled the air, mingling with the faint, metallic tang of tears. Hands were clasped, condolences offered, but nothing could truly penetrate the raw, aching grief that consumed Veronica and Damien. They sat through the eulogies, the prayers, the quiet procession to the municipal cemetery in Villa Carlos Paz, each moment a searing reminder of their irreversible loss. Amidst the swirling currents of their devastation, another quiet worry began to surface, an unsettling question that tugged at their already frayed emotions. Capitan was nowhere to be found. In the immediate aftermath of Miguel's passing, in the chaotic, sorrow-laden hours when the final goodbyes were whispered in the house filled with the somber presence of mourners, Capitan had simply disappeared. He hadn't been there to witness the ambulance, hadn't been present for the quiet, heartbreaking removal of Miguel. One moment, he had been a constant, anxious presence by Miguel's side, the next, he was gone, vanished like a phantom into the night. Veronica, in her fog of sorrow, had called his name, searched the garden, but the dog was not there. Damien, with a child's desperate hope, had whispered for him, thinking perhaps Capitan was simply hiding, overwhelmed by the palpable sadness. But there was no answering bark, no familiar presence. His absence was a mystery, a secondary ache in the vast ocean of their grief. They assumed he had run off, perhaps disoriented by the profound shift in the household, by the sudden, inexplicable void left by his beloved human. Their focus was necessarily on their own human grief, on navigating the stark reality of Miguel's death, but the silent question of Capitan's whereabouts lingered, an unsettling tremor beneath the surface of their sorrow. A week after the funeral, a raw, aching eternity for Veronica and Damien, they made the pilgrimage to the municipal cemetery in Villa Carlos Paz. The air was cooler now, the late afternoon light softer, less harsh than the glaring sun of the previous week. They carried a small bouquet of Miguel's favorite white roses, their petals still dewy, their fragrance a gentle, poignant reminder of life's fragile beauty. The cemetery, a sprawling expanse of meticulously tended lawns and marble headstones, stretched out before them, a silent city of the departed. As they walked the familiar path, the crunch of gravel beneath their feet the only sound breaking the hushed reverence of the place, Veronica's gaze swept over the rows of graves, a weariness in her eyes. Damien, clutching his mother's hand, kept his head down, still grappling with the immediacy of his loss, the deep ache of his father's absence. They approached Miguel's freshly dug grave, the mound of earth still prominent, a temporary wooden cross marking the spot. And then, they saw him. A figure, dark and still, was curled up at the foot of the grave. It was a German shepherd, its sable fur slightly disheveled, its posture one of quiet, unwavering determination. It was Capitan. Veronica stopped dead, her hand flying to her mouth, a choked gasp escaping her lips. Damien, following her stunned gaze, looked up. His eyes widened, disbelief warring with a sudden, overwhelming surge of emotion. It couldn't be. How? Capitan, as if sensing their presence, slowly lifted his head. His dark eyes, though weary, held a familiar spark, a profound, almost ancient loyalty. He didn't bark, didn't rush towards them with his usual exuberant greeting. He simply looked at them, then back at the grave, his message clear, unmistakable. He was exactly where he needed to be. The several kilometers from their home to the cemetery, a distance Capitan had never traversed alone, seemed impossible for a dog to navigate, let alone to locate one specific, unmarked grave among hundreds. Yet, there he was. He had somehow, with an instinct far beyond human comprehension, found his way. He had been there, guarding, for days, his body a silent testament to a love that defied explanation, a devotion that transcended the finality of death. Veronica felt a fresh wave of tears, but this time, they were mixed with something else. Astonishment, a profound sense of wonder, and an unexpected surge of awe. Capitan, her husband's loyal companion, had not abandoned them. He had simply followed his heart, his instinct, to the one place he knew his master remained. Damien, his own grief momentarily eclipsed by this extraordinary sight, dropped the roses and rushed forward, falling to his knees beside Capitan. He buried his face in the dog's fur, feeling the warm, solid presence of the animal, a tangible link to his father. Capitan, for the briefest moment, leaned into Damien's embrace, a soft, rumbling sigh escaping him. But his gaze, even then, quickly returned to the earth beneath which Miguel rested. His posture remained resolute, focused, a quiet determination radiating from him. The cemetery, initially a place of stark sorrow, transformed in that instant into a stage for an extraordinary act of devotion, a powerful, unspoken narrative of love beyond the veil. This discovery, both heartbreaking and miraculous, marked the beginning of Capitan's legend, a tale that would echo far beyond the quiet confines of Villa Carlos Paz. If you're finding this story of unwavering loyalty compelling, please subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales of extraordinary animal bonds. The shock of recognition, the raw surge of emotion that had momentarily overwhelmed Veronica and Damien at the sight of Capitan, slowly began to give way to a tender, heartbreaking determination. Damien, still kneeling by the grave, his face buried in Capitan's fur, felt the dog's warmth, a grounding presence amidst the swirling chaos of his grief. Capitan, after that initial, brief lean into the boy's embrace, had already resumed his vigil, his dark eyes fixed on the mound of earth, a silent, unyielding sentinel. Veronica, her voice thick with unshed tears, finally found her footing, stepping closer. Capitan, she whispered, her hand reaching out, trembling, to stroke his head. His fur was rougher than she remembered, a little dusty, but the familiar shape of his skull, the intelligent curve of his ear, were unmistakably his. "Oh, my Capitan, how did you?" The question hung in the cool cemetery air, unanswered, unanswerable. They spent a long while there, the mother and son, simply observing. The sun began its slow descent, painting the western sky in hues of bruised purple and fading orange, casting long, distorted shadows across the gravestones. A gentle breeze, carrying the scent of cypress and damp earth, rustled through the leaves of a nearby jacaranda tree. Capitan remained steadfast. He acknowledged their presence with a soft flick of his ear, a brief glance, but his focus never truly wavered from Miguel's resting place. It was a devotion so profound, so utterly singular, that it was almost intimidating. "We have to take him home, Mama," Damien finally murmured, his voice muffled by Capitan's fur. He looked up, his eyes pleading, brimming with the desperate hope of a child who believes that if they can just bring a piece of the past back, everything might somehow be less broken. Veronica nodded, though a knot of apprehension tightened in her stomach. She knew, deep down, that this wouldn't be easy. She reached into the bag she carried, pulling out a small piece of dried meat she had brought for Capitan, a familiar treat he adored. "Come on, mijo, let's try," they coaxed him, their voices soft, laden with affection and a quiet desperation. Veronica held out the meat, its savory aroma wafting towards him. Capitan, his nose twitching slightly, acknowledged the offering, but did not move. He simply held his ground, his body a solid, unmoving mass of loyalty. "Capitan, vamos a casa," Damien pleaded, gently tugging at his collar. The dog allowed the touch, even leaned into it momentarily, a flicker of his old affection in his eyes. He rose slowly, his movements stiff from days spent in one position, and took a tentative step away from the grave. A spark of hope ignited in Veronica's chest. Perhaps, she thought, the pull of home, the familiarity of his family, would be strong enough. They walked a short distance, a few painful, hopeful meters. Capitan walked with them, his head low, his tail a languid, almost imperceptible sway. But then, as they neared the main path, his steps faltered. He stopped, his gaze sweeping back towards the distant, stark white cross that marked Miguel's grave. A low whine, a sound of profound inner conflict, escaped him. Then, with a sudden, decisive jerk, he pulled free from Damien's grasp. He didn't run, didn't bolt in a panic. He simply turned, with a quiet, resolute purpose, and began to walk back. His steps were slow, deliberate, each paw placement an affirmation of his choice. He didn't look back at Veronica or Damien, his path set, his destination undeniable. He returned to Miguel's grave, circled it once, then lay down again, his head resting on his paws, his posture once more that of the unwavering sentinel. Veronica watched him, a profound sadness settling over her, mingling with an immense, almost unbearable pride. Her heart ached, a sharp, physical pain, for the dog she wanted to bring home, to comfort, to hold close. But she also understood, with a clarity that stung, that Capitan had made his choice. His silent resolve was a force as immutable as the earth itself. There was no shaking him, no changing his mind. He was here, and here he would stay. Damien, tears streaming down his face, understood too. He sank to the ground, not by Capitan, but a short distance away, watching the dog, a tangible link to his father, living, breathing testament to a love that would not die. The impossible return was truly impossible. The sun dipped below the horizon, plunging the cemetery into the deep blue twilight, and still, Capitan remained, a silhouette of unwavering loyalty against the fading light. As the calendar pages turned from the stark grief of late 2006 into the tentative hope of early 2007, Capitan's presence at the municipal cemetery slowly began to register with its daily inhabitants. The cemetery director, a man named Ricardo, whose days were usually filled with the mundane practicalities of plot assignments, maintenance schedules, and the quiet dignity of funeral arrangements, was initially perplexed. His office, a small, somber room smelling faintly of old paper and disinfectant, offered a view of the main pathways, and he had noticed the dog. At first, Capitan was just a stray, an anomaly. Ricardo, a pragmatic man, had his concerns. A dog wandering freely could disturb other visitors, potentially dig up graves, or present hygiene issues. He dispatched one of his workers, a gruff but kind-hearted man named Jorge, to gently shoo the dog away. Jorge approached Capitan with a broom, making soft shooing noises, his movements cautious. But Capitan merely lifted his head, observed Jorge with those deep, knowing eyes, then slowly, deliberately, lowered it again, his gaze returning to the grave. There was no aggression, no fear, just an unyielding stillness. Jorge, accustomed to the skittishness of strays, found himself disarmed. He tried again, a little more firmly, but Capitan remained rooted. It was as if the dog had simply decided he was not moving, and that was that. Jorge reported back, a shrug in his shoulders, a hint of something he couldn't quite articulate in his eyes. The workers, a small team who knew the cemetery's every nook and cranny, began to observe Capitan more closely. They saw him day after day, always near the same grave. They noticed his peaceful demeanor, his focused vigil. He never bothered other visitors, never barked without cause, never caused any trouble. He simply existed, a quiet, mournful presence. Whispers began to circulate among them, hushed conversations about the dog who wouldn't leave his master. Then, Veronica and Damien began their regular visits. They approached Ricardo, explaining Capitan's story, Miguel's passing, and their own heartbreaking attempts to bring him home. Veronica, her voice filled with a mother's pain and a wife's enduring love, painted a picture of Capitan's profound devotion. Ricardo listened, his initial skepticism slowly giving way to a grudging, then a profound, respect. He was a man of logic and order, but even he could not deny the extraordinary nature of what he was hearing and seeing. He watched Capitan for days, from his office window, from discreet distances. He saw the dog, rain or shine, curled by the grave, a silent, unwavering guardian. He saw the way Capitan would rise when Veronica and Damien visited, a brief, affectionate greeting, before returning to his post. It wasn't just a dog, it was a living monument to loyalty. The cemetery workers, too, became witnesses to this quiet phenomenon. They saw the sadness in Capitan's eyes, the way he seemed to carry the weight of his grief with a quiet dignity. They saw him endure the chill of the early mornings, the harsh glare of the midday sun. Their initial concerns about a stray dog on the premises transformed into something else entirely: a sense of empathy, a growing awe, and a quiet, unspoken protectiveness. They began to leave small bowls of water near the grave, discreetly, almost shyly. A crust of bread, a leftover piece of meat from their lunch, would appear near Capitan's sleeping spot. The cemetery director, after much internal deliberation, gave a quiet nod of approval. Capitan was no longer a problem to be solved. He was a silent guardian, a unique presence, and a testament to a love that defied the boundaries of life and death. The cemetery, usually a place of solemn routine, now held an extraordinary, living heart. As the season cycled through the early months of 2007, Capitan fully established his daily routine at the municipal cemetery. It was a life of quiet resilience, a solitary existence imbued with a singular, unwavering purpose. His world had shrunk from the comfortable, bustling home of the Guzman family to the serene, ordered landscape of the cemetery, and he adapted with the profound instinct of an animal driven by an unshakable bond. His days began with the first blush of dawn, the sky above Villa Carlos Paz turning from inky black to soft lavender, then to a brilliant gold. He would stir from his sleep, usually curled close to Miguel's grave, sometimes tucked beneath the sparse branches of a nearby cypress tree, offering a meager shelter from the night chill. He would rise, stretch his powerful limbs, and then, with a quiet solemnity, begin his morning patrol. This patrol was not wide-ranging. It was a circumscribed territory, centered meticulously around Miguel's grave. He would walk slowly, deliberately, circling the plot, sniffing the air, his ears swiveling, taking in the sounds of the waking cemetery: the distant hum of a lawnmower, the chirping of early birds, the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze. His movements were fluid, graceful, a testament to his German Shepherd lineage, but they carried a subtle weariness, a quiet melancholy. He wasn't guarding against intruders, he was guarding a memory, a sacred space. He had learned to navigate the cemetery grounds with an almost preternatural understanding. He knew where the sun would offer the most warmth on a cool morning, where the shade would be deepest during the midday heat. He knew the paths the workers took, the quiet corners where he could rest undisturbed. He found shelter in the lee of a large mausoleum during the occasional downpour, or nestled amongst the dense foliage of a rose bush when the wind grew too sharp. His intelligence, once applied to playful games with Damien or attentive listening to Miguel, was now entirely dedicated to maintaining his vigil, to surviving within the confines of his self-imposed duty. The cemetery workers, initially hesitant, had grown not just accustomed to Capitan, but genuinely fond of him. Jorge, the gruff worker who had first tried to shoo him away, now made a point of leaving a fresh bowl of water by Miguel's grave each morning, sometimes even a small portion of his own breakfast, a piece of bread, leftover empanada. Other workers followed suit. A quiet, unspoken network of care formed around Capitan. They saw his ribs were still visible, but he was no longer starving. He accepted their offerings with a quiet dignity, a brief, appreciative glance, never becoming overly familiar, never losing his focus. He became a silent, comforting fixture of the cemetery. Visitors, coming to mourn their own loved ones, would often see him, a dark, still silhouette against the backdrop of marble and stone. Some would pause, their own grief momentarily softened by the sight of such unwavering loyalty. Children, visiting with their parents, would point, their voices hushed, their eyes wide with wonder. Capitan, however, remained largely oblivious to the growing attention. His world was the grave, the earth beneath which his master lay. His purpose was clear, his resolve unyielding. He was a living testament to a love that defied the boundaries of life and death, an enduring presence in a place dedicated to memory. The changing seasons, from the vibrant bloom of spring to the crisp chill of autumn, simply marked the passage of time, each day a renewed affirmation of Capitan's profound and solitary vigil. The quiet resilience Capitan embodied at Miguel's grave deeply affected Veronica and Damien, reshaping their own grief and their understanding of love. By mid-2007, their visits to the cemetery had transformed from desperate attempts to reclaim Capitan into poignant rituals of shared connection. They no longer tried to force him home. The futility of their earlier efforts, combined with the profound understanding of Capitan's unwavering choice, had led to a bittersweet acceptance. Veronica would arrive, usually with Damien, carrying a thermos of water and a small container of freshly cooked meat for Capitan. She would walk straight to Miguel's grave, her heart heavy but also strangely lightened by the sight of the loyal dog. Capitan would rise to greet them, a soft, low rumble in his chest, his tail giving a slow, deliberate wag. He would allow Veronica to stroke his head, his body leaning into her touch for a moment, a brief acknowledgement of their shared history, their shared sorrow. He would eat the food she brought, slowly, deliberately, his eyes often lifting to hers, a silent gratitude passing between them. For Veronica, these visits were a complex tapestry of emotions. There was the ever-present ache of Miguel's absence, a wound that time could never fully heal. But there was also an immense pride in Capitan, a deep, comforting sense that a piece of Miguel's love, his spirit, lived on through the dog. Capitan was a tangible link, a living memory. She saw in his unwavering vigil the same quiet strength, the same steadfast loyalty that had defined her husband. Accepting Capitan's new home, his chosen duty, was a difficult but necessary step in her own grieving process. It allowed her to respect his profound love, even as it meant relinquishing her desire to have him back in their empty home. The cemetery, once a place of stark, unbearable sorrow, slowly began to transform into a space of enduring connection, a sacred ground where the threads of love, loss, and loyalty intertwined. For Damien, Capitan became an even more profound connection to his late father. As a young boy grappling with the enormity of death, Capitan offered a tangible, living presence of his father's love. He would sit beside Capitan, his small hand resting on the dog's warm fur, sometimes whispering his own thoughts, his own sorrows, into the quiet air. He didn't expect Capitan to understand the words, but he felt the dog's presence, his unwavering closeness to Miguel, and in that, he found a profound, almost spiritual solace. It was as if, through Capitan, a part of his father was still there, still watchful, still loving. The dog was a silent confidant, a non-judgmental listener, a living echo of the man Damien missed so terribly. Their visits were often quiet, filled with unspoken understanding. They would sit for long stretches, watching Capitan, watching the sun move across the sky, feeling the gentle breeze. The air was often thick with the scent of pine and freshly cut grass, punctuated by the distant sounds of the city, which seemed to fade into insignificance within the cemetery walls. Capitan, after his brief greetings and the acceptance of food, would always return to his primary duty. He would settle back down by Miguel's grave, his posture resolute, his gaze fixed. He was content in their presence, acknowledging their love, but his ultimate allegiance, his life's purpose, remained anchored to the earth beneath which his owner rested. There was a deep, quiet gratitude in his eyes when they left, a silent promise of his continued vigil, a testament to the enduring power of their unique, shared grief. As the year 2007 drew to a close, the story of Capitan, the loyal German shepherd, began to ripple outwards, extending beyond the immediate circle of the Guzman family and the cemetery staff. What had begun as a deeply personal, heartbreaking act of devotion slowly started to transform into a local legend, a quiet marvel whispered among the residents of Villa Carlos Paz. Visitors to the municipal cemetery, coming to pay respects to their own departed loved ones, would often catch sight of Capitan. He was, by then, an unmistakable fixture, a sable-furred sentinel, always by the same grave, his presence a stark, moving testament to loyalty. They would point, their voices hushed, their eyes wide with a mixture of curiosity and reverence. "Look," one might whisper to a companion, "that's the dog. Miguel Guzman's dog." The tale spread organically, carried on the gentle currents of local conversation. Over coffee at the corner cafeteria, during market day in the town square, or at family gatherings, people would share the story. "Did you hear about Capitan? The dog who won't leave his master's grave. He's been there for months now." Each retelling added a layer of awe, each listener deepening the legend. It wasn't just a dog anymore, it was Capitan, a symbol. People began to visit the cemetery not just for their own beloved dead, but also to catch a glimpse of this extraordinary animal. They would walk past Miguel Guzman's grave, slowing their pace, their gazes drawn to the steadfast dog. They saw his quiet dignity, his unwavering focus, and they felt a profound sense of connection to something elemental, something pure. Some would linger, watching him from a respectful distance, their own hearts touched by his devotion. They might leave a small offering, a biscuit, a gentle word, though Capitan remained largely oblivious to the growing human attention, his focus unbroken. The atmosphere of the cemetery, while still a place of sorrow, began to subtly shift. There was an added layer, a hushed reverence that extended beyond the individual graves. Capitan was a living embodiment of the enduring power of love, a comforting presence for those who grieved, a silent companion in their own sorrow. His story resonated deeply, particularly in a community where family bonds and loyalty were highly valued. He became a shared experience, a topic that united people in a common sense of wonder and admiration. The cemetery workers, who had initially viewed Capitan with pragmatic concern, now spoke of him with a mixture of pride and affection. They were the daily witnesses to his unwavering vigil, the quiet keepers of his extraordinary story. They saw the curious glances, heard the hushed whispers, and knew that Capitan was no longer just their charge. He was becoming a local hero, a silent, furry guardian whose loyalty had transcended the boundaries of a simple pet and become something truly legendary, a beacon of unconditional love in the heart of Villa Carlos Paz. The quiet marvel that was Capitan had taken root, and his legend was only just beginning to blossom. As the calendar pages turned from the whispers of 2007 into the full bloom of 2008, and then into the steady pulse of 2009, Capitan's routine at the municipal cemetery solidified into an immutable fixture. He was no longer just a dog, he was the unwavering sentinel, a living monument etched into the very landscape of Villa Carlos Paz. His days unfolded with a quiet, almost monastic rhythm, a testament to a devotion so profound it defied the relentless march of time. Rain or shine, summer's scorching embrace or winter's biting chill, Capitan remained by Miguel's grave. He was an anchor in a world of fleeting moments, a constant in the face of change. The summer sun, a relentless, blinding orb in the Argentine sky, would beat down upon the cemetery, baking the earth and turning the air into a shimmering haze. Capitan would seek the meager shade of a cypress tree, or press himself against the cool, marble base of a nearby mausoleum, his tongue lolling slightly, his breathing a little heavier. But his eyes, always, would drift back to Miguel's grave. He would drink from the metal bowl the workers faithfully refilled, perhaps even dip his paws into the cool water, but never would he stray far. His fur, once sleek and vibrant, now showed the subtle wear of the elements, a slight sun bleaching, a dustier sheen, yet his spirit, that core of unshakable loyalty, remained entirely unbroken. When the autumn winds swept through the Sierras Chicas, bringing with them the scent of decaying leaves and the promise of colder days, Capitan would find shelter in the lee of a larger headstone, or curl tightly, his tail tucked over his nose, against the base of Miguel's cross. The cemetery workers, now fully invested in his well-being, often left old blankets or sacks near his chosen resting spots, which he would cautiously accept, pushing them into a comfortable nest. He would shake off the morning dew, his powerful muscles rippling beneath his aging coat, and resume his silent vigil. Winter brought a different kind of challenge. The air would grow crisp, sometimes biting, frosting the grass with a delicate layer of white. The sounds of the cemetery would sharpen, the rustle of dry leaves sounding louder, the distant calls of birds more stark. Capitan, his breath pluming in the cold air, would huddle closer to the earth, drawing what little warmth he could from the soil. He would rise stiffly, his joints aching with the cold, but he would rise. His purpose was a fire that burned within him, keeping the chill at bay, fueling his resolve. He had become an integral, silent part of the cemetery's landscape, as much a fixture as the ancient olive trees or the weathered statues. His presence provided a strange, comforting solace to other grieving families. They would often pause, watching him, their own hands resting on the cold marble of their loved ones' graves. A woman visiting her mother might whisper, "He reminds me of my old dog, Luna. She waited by the door for weeks after my husband passed." A man, his eyes misting, might recall a childhood pet, long gone, and the fierce, simple love they shared. Capitan, in his quiet steadfastness, became a mirror for their own unspoken sorrows, a symbol of enduring love that transcended the boundaries of species. He was a beacon of hope in a place of endings, a testament to the idea that love, true love, could indeed stretch beyond the veil of death. The air around him often felt serene, almost ethereal, as if his quiet presence imbued the very ground with a sense of reflective peace. He was the cemetery's living anchor, a heart beating steadily amidst the quiet repose of the dead. The quiet reverence that had settled around Capitan in Villa Carlos Paz was about to be shattered, not by malice, but by the relentless, all-consuming gaze of the world. As 2010 dawned, bringing with it the hum of new technologies and the ever-faster spread of information, Capitan's story, having spread locally on the gentle currents of whispers and shared glances, finally caught the attention of something far larger, far more powerful, the global media. It began subtly, with a local newspaper reporter, then a regional television crew. But the image of the loyal German shepherd, a silent sentinel by a simple grave, was too potent, too universally resonant to remain contained. Soon, national news outlets in Argentina picked up the thread, their broadcasts painting Capitan as a national hero, a symbol of unwavering loyalty. And then, the international wires hummed with his name. Journalists, photographers, and film crews descended upon the Villa Carlos Paz Municipal Cemetery like a flock of migrating birds, their equipment glinting in the sun, their voices a sudden, jarring cacophony. The cemetery, usually a sanctuary of hushed reverence, was transformed into a bustling, almost chaotic scene. Vans with satellite dishes parked haphazardly along the main drive. Reporters, their microphones thrust forward like eager probes, sought out anyone who would speak. The Guzman family, the cemetery director, the bewildered but proud cemetery workers. Veronica and Damien, still grappling with their private grief, found themselves thrust into an unexpected, overwhelming spotlight. Interview after interview, camera flashes blinding, questions about Miguel, about Capitan, about their feelings. Veronica, her voice often trembling, spoke of her husband's gentle nature, of Capitan's profound bond with him. She spoke of the heartbreak of finding him at the grave, and the eventual, bittersweet acceptance of his unwavering choice. Damien, now a young teenager, stood beside his mother, his eyes wide with a mixture of pride and unease. He recounted Capitan's arrival, the games they played, the quiet connection between his father and the dog. He spoke of the solace Capitan's presence at the grave brought him, a tangible link to the father he missed so terribly. The cemetery director, Ricardo, a man more accustomed to administrative duties than public speaking, found himself giving interviews to international news channels. He spoke with a quiet dignity, explaining the practicalities of Capitan's presence, the initial concerns, and the eventual, profound respect that had grown. He pointed out the bowls of water, the makeshift shelters, the care provided by his staff. The cemetery workers, Jorge and others, usually anonymous figures in the background, suddenly found themselves on camera, their weather-beaten faces softened by the pride in their loyal charge. They spoke of Capitan's routine, his gentle nature, his unyielding focus. Capitan, meanwhile, remained remarkably unflustered by the sudden media frenzy. He was the eye of the storm, a serene, unmoving presence amidst the swirling commotion. Cameras flashed, reporters jostled, but his dark eyes remained fixed on Miguel's grave. He would acknowledge the presence of Veronica or Damien with a soft nudge, but the myriad of strangers, the whirring of camera lenses, the constant chatter, seemed to pass over him without truly touching his core. He was a dog with a singular purpose, and no amount of human attention, no sudden burst of global fame, could deviate him from his unwavering vigil. His image, a loyal German shepherd by a simple, unassuming grave, became iconic, splashed across newspapers and television screens worldwide. A local legend had, in a breathtakingly short span of time, transformed into a global phenomenon, a powerful, poignant narrative of love beyond death, resonating in countless hearts across continents. The sudden, intense glare of global fame, while elevating Capitan's story to legendary status, also brought with it unforeseen challenges. As the years 2011 and 2012 unfolded, the quiet serenity that Capitan had once known was frequently disrupted. The world, having taken notice, now felt a collective ownership over his narrative, and not all interpretations were benign. One of the most persistent challenges came from well-meaning but misguided individuals who, seeing Capitan's steadfast presence at the grave, mistook his profound vigil for abandonment. They saw an old dog, seemingly alone in a cemetery, and concluded he needed to be rescued. These attempts were often heartbreakingly earnest, driven by a genuine desire to help, but utterly failed to comprehend the depth of Capitan's choice. People would approach with leashes and dog carriers, trying to coax him away, offering tempting treats, their voices laced with pity. Capitan, however, always resisted. He would allow himself to be petted, perhaps even accept a morsel of food, but the moment any attempt was made to lead him away from Miguel's grave, his mild irritation would manifest in a subtle stiffening of his body, a low, guttural growl, or a quiet, determined retreat back to his chosen spot. His message was clear: this was his home, and here he would stay. Simultaneously, as Capitan continued to age, concerns about his health became more prominent. He was no longer a young, robust dog. The years spent outdoors, exposed to the elements, coupled with the natural decline of age, began to show. His movements became slower, his gait a little stiffer, his fur thinning in places. Local veterinarians, alerted by the cemetery staff and the Guzman family, began to make regular visits. These were delicate interventions, often coordinated by Ricardo, the cemetery director, and Veronica. The veterinarians, initially cautious of the famous, fiercely loyal dog, quickly learned to approach him with respect. They would conduct gentle examinations right there by the grave, checking his eyes, his teeth, his heart. Capitan, despite his usual aloofness with strangers, seemed to tolerate these checkups, perhaps sensing their benevolent intent. He would receive vaccinations, medication for his joints, and special dietary supplements to boost his aging immune system. The Guzman family, particularly Damien, would often be present, offering comforting words, gently stroking Capitan's head, reassuring him. Despite these necessary disruptions, Capitan consistently demonstrated his unwavering desire to remain at the grave. There were times when his health necessitated a temporary removal for more intensive care, perhaps a night at a local clinic. But each time, the moment he was released, his unerring instinct led him straight back to Miguel's resting place. He would resist being loaded into a vehicle that didn't lead to the cemetery, his whines growing more insistent, his body language clearly stating his intention. It was a powerful, silent affirmation of his choice, a resilience that defied every attempt to alter his path. The cemetery staff and the Guzman family became his fiercest advocates, protecting his right to choose his home, managing his well-being with increasing care and understanding, determined to honor the depth of his devotion. As the leaves of 2013 turned from vibrant green to russet and gold, marking the passage of time, Damien Guzman, now a young man on the cusp of adulthood, found his visits to Capitan becoming not just more frequent, but profoundly, intimately personal. He had grown from a grieving boy clinging to a physical link to his father into a thoughtful young man, navigating his own path, yet always drawn back to the quiet, steadfast presence at the cemetery. His visits were no longer just about bringing food or checking on Capitan's well-being, though those acts of care remained. They were about connection, about memory, about a shared understanding that transcended words. Damien would arrive in the late afternoons, the slanting light of the setting sun casting long, gentle shadows across the graves, and walk directly to Miguel's plot. Capitan, his senses perhaps dulled by age, would still somehow know he was coming. He would lift his head, his tail giving a slow, deliberate wag, a quiet, knowing affection in his dark eyes. Damien would sit beside him, not on the cold ground, but often on a small, worn blanket he now carried, sharing the space with the loyal dog. He would talk, his voice low and confiding, about his day, about his studies, about his dreams for the future. He would tell Capitan stories about his mother, about friends, about things that made him laugh, and sometimes, about the lingering ache of missing his father. He didn't expect Capitan to respond in words, but he felt the dog's warmth beside him, the rhythmic rise and fall of his chest, the soft nudge of his head against Damien's arm. In those moments, he felt a profound, almost spiritual connection, a sense of his father's enduring presence, channeled through the loyal dog. It was as if Capitan was listening not just for himself, but for Miguel, a living bridge between the living and the departed. Damien often brought Capitan his favorite treats, a special cut of meat, a high-quality kibble, which the old dog would eat with quiet relish, his eyes briefly deviating from his grave-focused attention to meet Damien's gaze in a look of deep, quiet gratitude. These interactions were poignant, a tender intimacy forged in shared grief and enduring love. They showed the continuation of family bonds, not just between humans, but extending to Capitan, who had become an irreplaceable part of their narrative. Capitan, in his unwavering vigil, facilitated a living memory for the Guzman family, a tangible, breathing testament to Miguel's enduring place in their hearts. The cemetery, for Damien, had become a sacred space, not just of sorrow, but of enduring connection. It was where he could feel closest to his father, where he could share his life with the one who had loved Miguel as fiercely as he had. Capitan, for his part, while always returning to his primary duty, would greet Damien with a special, gentle warmth, an acknowledgement of their unique bond, a silent understanding of the love that bound them all together, across the boundaries of life and death, through the quiet, changing seasons of the years. By early 2014, Capitan, the legendary German Shepherd, had guarded Miguel's grave for nearly 8 years. He was now an elderly dog, his once powerful frame showing the undeniable signs of time's relentless passage. He was frail, his movements slower, more deliberate, his once vibrant sable fur now streaked with gray around his muzzle and eyes. His sight and hearing, once so keen, had diminished, making him startle more easily at sudden sounds, or causing him to miss a familiar face until it was close. Yet, despite the physical decline, his spirit remained indomitable, a quiet, unyielding flame that continued to burn brightly within him. His image had become synonymous with loyalty, not just in Villa Carlos Paz, but across the globe. He was a living monument to unbreakable bonds, a testament to a love so pure and steadfast that it defied every expectation, every logical explanation. When people spoke of loyalty, they spoke of Capitan. The cemetery staff, who had watched him for so many years, had developed an immense, almost familial respect for him. Ricardo, the director, often found himself simply observing Capitan from his office window, a quiet awe settling over him. Jorge, the worker who had first tried to shoo him away, now approached the old dog with the gentleness reserved for a beloved elder, ensuring his water bowl was always full, his resting spot comfortable. They all recognized him as a truly unique being, whose life had become a powerful narrative of love beyond death, a story that resonated deeply in their own lives. The Guzman family, particularly Veronica and Damian, held Capitan in profound esteem. He was more than a pet, he was a family member, a guardian, a living link to the man they had lost. His continued presence brought them comfort, a quiet reassurance that Miguel was not forgotten, that his love lived on. The local community, too, viewed Capitan with a reverence that bordered on veneration. He was their local hero, a silent, furry icon. Children who had grown up hearing his story would now bring their own children to the cemetery, pointing him out with hushed voices. His presence was a comfort, a quiet inspiration that reminded them of the enduring power of unconditional love, of faithfulness that transcended even the grave. The atmosphere around Capitan now, as he entered the twilight of his long vigil, was tinged with a subtle melancholy. There was a collective understanding that this extraordinary chapter was nearing its natural conclusion. Yet, there was also a profound sense of quiet triumph, a celebration of a life lived with such singular purpose and devotion. Capitan, peaceful and dignified, continued to fulfill his life's purpose, a serene acceptance in his weary eyes. He was a beacon, a symbol, a story whispered from heart to heart, an indelible mark on the hearts of many, embodying the very essence of devotion. The subtle melancholy that had begun to tint the air around Capitan in late 2013 deepened into a profound, almost palpable, reverence as early 2014 arrived. Capitan, the steadfast guardian, was now undeniably in the twilight of his legend. Each morning, as the first pale light filtered over the distant Sierras Chicas, casting long, skeletal shadows across the slumbering cemetery, his movements were slower, more deliberate, a testament to the cumulative weight of years spent in unwavering vigil. The once powerful, fluid gait of the German Shepherd was now a careful shuffle, his strong legs stiff with the aches of old age and the relentless damp of countless nights spent outdoors. His once sharp, intelligent eyes, dark as polished obsidian, had begun to cloud with a milky film, dimming their keen perceptiveness. He would sometimes startle at the sudden, unexpected sound of a distant car or the sharp call of a bird, his hearing, too, having receded into a muffled world. Yet, despite these physical betrayals, the core of him, the indomitable spirit that had held him anchored to Miguel's grave for nearly 8 years, remained undimmed. His resolve, etched into every line of his weary face, was as clear and unshakable as it had been on that first astonishing day. The cemetery workers, who had become his surrogate family, his daily companions in his silent vigil, now watched him with a tenderness that bordered on heartbreak. Jorge, the gruff man whose initial attempts to shoo Capitan away had long since morphed into a deep, unspoken affection, would often pause his work near Miguel's grave, his hands resting on the handle of his rake, simply observing the old dog. He'd notice how Capitan struggled to rise, how he'd carefully choose his steps, how the spark in his eyes, though dimmer, still held that fierce, singular focus on the earth beneath which Miguel rested. Their care for him intensified, becoming a quiet, collective ritual of comfort. They ensured his water bowl, strategically placed out of the direct sun, was always brimming with fresh, cool water. His food, a soft, easily digestible kibble, fortified with supplements, was left for him in a sheltered spot, protected from birds and other animals. On particularly cold mornings, Jorge or another worker, perhaps Maria, a woman with a gentle touch and a soft heart, would discreetly lay an old, clean blanket near his preferred resting spot, knowing Capitan would eventually nose it into a comfortable nest. The air around them was thick with a shared understanding, a quiet and spoken agreement that this long, extraordinary vigil was nearing its natural conclusion. A gentle melancholy settled over their daily routines, a quiet anticipation of an inevitable farewell. Damien, now a young man whose own life was blooming with the promise of independence and new experiences, found himself drawn to the cemetery with an even greater frequency. He would arrive in the late afternoons, the setting sun casting long, orange-hued shadows that stretched like grasping fingers across the rows of headstones. He carried an extra blanket, a thermos of warm broth, and a heart heavy with both love and a creeping sorrow. He would sit beside Capitan, his hand resting on the old dog's thinning fur, feeling the slow, steady thump of his heart. Capitan, sensing his presence, would lean into the touch, a soft, almost imperceptible sigh escaping him, his cloudy eyes lifting to Damien's face, a brief, knowing connection passing between them. Damien would speak to him, his voice low and tender, reminiscing about his father, about Capitan's puppy days, about the enduring power of their shared love. He saw the weariness in Capitan, the stiffness in his movements, the gentle decline that was slowly, inevitably drawing the curtain on this extraordinary life. He would help Capitan stand, guide him to his food, ensuring he ate and drank. There was a quiet watch, a collective holding of breath, as the days turned into weeks. Each sunrise that found Capitan still at his post was a small, profound victory, a testament to his unbreakable will. The setting sun, casting its final golden rays across the hallowed ground, often seemed to linger a moment longer on Capitan, as if acknowledging the approaching end of an era, a final, poignant blessing on a life lived with such unparalleled devotion. Then, one crisp morning in early February of 2014, the quiet rhythm of the cemetery was broken by a different kind of silence. The air was still, colder than usual, holding the promise of a late winter frost. Jorge, making his rounds with his usual bucket of fresh water, approached Miguel Guzman's grave. He had grown accustomed to seeing Capitan stir, to lift his head, to offer that quiet, knowing glance. But this morning, there was no movement. Capitan was found peacefully deceased. He lay curled, not directly on Miguel's grave, but a short distance away, nestled beneath the familiar branches of the cypress tree that had offered him shelter for so many years. His body was still, his eyes closed, his breathing ceased. There was no sign of struggle, no frantic last moments. He had simply, quietly, collapsed due to natural causes, his old heart finally giving out, his body succumbing to the advanced age and declining health that had slowly, relentlessly, claimed him. He had chosen his final resting place within the very grounds he had guarded for so long, a testament to his unwavering commitment until his very last breath. Jorge stood over him, his bucket forgotten, the water sloshing faintly at his feet. A profound sadness, a deep, aching sense of loss, washed over him, mingling with an equally profound sense of closure and respect. Capitan was gone. The loyal sentinel, the heart of the cemetery, was finally at peace. He reached down, his calloused hand gently stroking the old dog's fur, now cold to the touch. A tear, unbidden, traced a path down his weathered cheek. The news spread through the cemetery staff like a ripple across still water. Hushed voices, solemn nods, a collective sigh of sorrow. Ricardo, the cemetery director, when informed, simply closed his office door and stood by the window, looking out at the cypress tree, a silent tribute to the extraordinary life that had just ended. He felt a pang of personal grief, but also a deep comfort in the knowledge that Capitan had remained true to his purpose, to his beloved Miguel, until the very end. When Veronica and Damien received the call, the world seemed to tilt on its axis once more. A fresh wave of grief, sharp and immediate, washed over them. Damien felt a hollow ache in his chest, a profound sense of emptiness. Capitan had been a constant in his life, a living, breathing link to his father. Now, that link was gone. Veronica, too, felt the sting of loss, but amidst her tears, there was also a profound comfort. Capitan had done what he had set out to do. He had guarded Miguel, he had waited. His loyalty had not wavered, not for a single day. He had fulfilled his extraordinary purpose. His passing was quiet, serene, a final, poignant affirmation of his enduring choice, a quiet completion to a legend. The cemetery, usually a place of solemnity, now held a new, quiet sorrow, mourning a loyal heart whose beat had finally stilled. The news of Capitan's death, though anticipated by those closest to him, resonated far beyond the quiet confines of the Villa Carlos Paz Municipal Cemetery. It spread rapidly, first through the local community, then across national borders, and finally, reaching his countless admirers worldwide. The online forums, the social media pages, the news outlets that had once celebrated his life now carried the somber announcement of his passing. For the Guzman family, the loss was deeply personal, a fresh wound reopening the grief for Miguel. Veronica found herself weeping not just for Capitan, but for the profound connection he represented, for the living memory of her husband that he had embodied. Damian, now a young man, felt the sting of a double loss. Capitan had been his last tangible link to his father, a silent confidant, a loyal shadow. He remembered the feel of the dog's fur, the quiet wisdom in his eyes, the unwavering presence that had offered him solace through so many years of mourning. The house felt emptier, the world a little colder, knowing Capitan was no longer keeping his vigil. Yet, amidst their sorrow, there was an immense pride, a deep gratitude for the extraordinary life Capitan had lived, for the pure, unwavering love he had shown. He had left them a legacy of devotion that would forever be etched in their hearts. In Villa Carlos Paz, a wave of collective mourning swept through the community. People who had only seen Capitan from a distance, or merely heard his story, felt a profound sense of loss. He was more than just a dog, he was a symbol, a quiet hero who had taught them about fidelity, about the enduring power of love. Tributes poured in from all corners of the town, from heartfelt messages left at the cemetery gates to hushed conversations in cafes, reflecting on the meaning of his loyalty. A small, dignified memorial was held at the cemetery, a gathering of those who had known and loved him. The Guzman family, the cemetery director Ricardo, Jorge and the other cemetery workers, and many local residents attended. The air was thick with a shared sense of loss, but also with a quiet reverence for the life they were commemorating. There were no grand speeches, just simple, heartfelt words, a moment of silence, and the gentle laying of flowers near the cypress tree where he had taken his last breath. The cemetery, once his silent stage, became a place of communal remembrance, a testament to the fact that Capitan's life had touched, and profoundly moved, so many. His passing was not just the end of a life, but the quiet closing of an extraordinary chapter, leaving behind a legacy that would continue to inspire. In the months that followed Capitan's passing, a deep sense of purpose settled over the Guzman family. They knew, without a shadow of a doubt, what needed to be done. Capitan, the loyal guardian, deserved to remain where he had chosen to spend his life, close to the master he had loved so fiercely. With the permission and full assistance of Ricardo, the cemetery director, arrangements were made for Capitan to be buried within the municipal cemetery grounds. It was a gesture of profound respect, a final acknowledgement of his unique place in their history and their hearts. The chosen spot was not directly on Miguel's grave, but close enough that their spirits could forever intertwine. A small, simple marker was placed, bearing his name, Capitan. The earth was soft, carefully prepared, and as the small wooden casket was lowered, a hush fell over the small gathering of family and cemetery workers. Damian, now a pillar of strength for his mother, gently placed a single white rose on the fresh mound of earth, a silent promise that Capitan, like his father, would never be forgotten. Veronica, her eyes brimming, offered a soft prayer, her heart finally finding a measure of peace. This act ensured that Capitan's incredible vigil was formally recognized, his loyalty honored, and that he remained, in spirit, close to the owner he had so faithfully guarded. In the years that followed, from 2015 onwards, Capitan's grave became a new point of pilgrimage. Visitors to the cemetery, drawn by the enduring power of his story, would often seek out his resting place. They would pause, reflect, sometimes leaving a small stone or a flower, a quiet tribute to the loyal dog. The small, unassuming grave became a symbol, a testament to the profound, mysterious connection that can exist between a human and their animal companion. Capitan's story continued to resonate, growing in stature and significance, echoing globally. It transcended the simple narrative of a dog and his owner, becoming a powerful, timeless tale taught in schools, shared in homes, and referenced in discussions about animal loyalty, unconditional love, and the enduring power of bonds that defy even death. His life, once a quiet, personal devotion, became a universal parable. He was remembered as more than just a German shepherd. He was Capitan, a symbol of unwavering devotion, a living monument to love beyond the veil of life and death. His legacy was not just in the stories told, or the articles written, but in the indelible mark he left on the hearts of countless individuals. He inspired compassion, evoked reflection on the depths of unconditional love, and reminded humanity of the extraordinary capacity for faithfulness that exists in the animal kingdom. For the Guzman family, Capitan's enduring memory brought comfort, a quiet reassurance that both Miguel and his loyal companion lived on, their story continuing to inspire, a beacon of pure devotion in a world often starved for such unwavering love. The spirit of Capitan, the loyal guardian, became eternal, a testament to a bond that time and death could never truly break.